Enterprise is a slogan. It's a marketing slogan. It's interesting. The analyst was probably a little younger because DataCore's initial launch place into this industry was into enterprises. Today we have over 6,000 customers. In the early days of DataCore, we had 200-300 very large ones. And it's interesting how virtualization as a product idea rather than as a technology has evolved. Originally, it was the large data centers running large boxes that adopted virtualization. The reason they adopted them was because the boxes were inflexible and they were hard to configure, and they were hard to make work with each other, and they were hard to do almost anything with. And the big boxes were being used to address an increasingly networked small machine marketplace where their historical limitations got in the way in a way that was pretty dramatic. So people put platforms like us between the physical machines and their actual usage. The enterprise guys themselves, in the last 12 years, the guys I'm describing became a much smaller share of the marketplace. The thing that drove that was that, first of all, large machine storage became impractical for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was cost. So that segment has stayed the same or declined steadily for 12 years. The net of it is that when you move from large machines to smaller machines in a networked environment, that came to be known originally as we entered the marketplace as storage area network, SAN storage. And it was essentially one part of a disintegration of the old large machines. What used to be internal networks became external networks of SANs. They were quite open-ended, quite complicated in many cases, but they introduced switching topologies and so on, scaled far beyond what the original big boxes used to do. In many cases, the cost factors drove down the price of those boxes significantly below where the large boxes had been. But the SAN took on the moniker of an enterprise solution, just as what had defined an enterprise solution disappeared. The enterprise solution had been essentially an all-in-one, out of the box. You know, you open up the crate, you got your box, it's got this drives in it, the switching infrastructure and topology is inside it. All the software is in the form of software running on that platform. None of it is distributed around the network. None of it is sort of open wiring. And all of it is designed with replication and so on in mind. The distributed systems, the storage area network systems, had those traits, small box or large, from the very beginning, but in a very loosely coupled fashion, because they were addressing an essentially different problem. Thousands of servers, hundreds of users, you know, whole 9 yards. The enterprise moniker became something of a misnomer. So when people talk about storage systems, the enterprise moniker went to single vendor, single source managed solutions rather than in describing a series of traits that such systems used to have. I think that's what he was talking about. I think what surprised your analyst, and what surprised analysts increasingly, is that in today's marketplace, it's relatively seamless and relatively easy to integrate large numbers of nominally incompatible platforms into a single system, as if it were an old-style enterprise system, right? And to make it run fast out of the gate. That is what we do. We've had a lot of experience in it. We're not the only ones who do it, but I think we're the best at it. The wires got faster. By the way, while this was happening, disks got virtualized, right? So the limitation is still the mechanical speed of the platters, no matter what anybody says. Hang 3 levels of cache in the disk drive, hang 3 levels of cache on the controller, let us do our caching on top of it. It's hardly the paths that are in the way today. There's an old storage market and a new storage market. New storage market is the one developing around virtual machines and VDI and cloud and all the rest of it. There are players like NetApps, which have been very nimble in that marketplace, and which people like EMC have watched essentially come in and be very competitive in their own captive market, the one created by VMware. So, on the other hand, players like NetApps have increasingly found it difficult to push a hardware-centric solution, even where they've been successful. So they've begun to deconstruct pieces of that pie. NetApps has started to make portions of its software portable and to rehost it on other platforms other than their own. It's a requirement, it's necessary. EMC, as I understand it, is doing much of the same thing. It's not the first time they've done it. When EMC was selling Clarions and focusing on Clarions, Clarions were essentially a portable software system that was locked inside a locked PC. Essentially what we do. But what limits the generality of the architecture of the EMCs, of IBM with SVC, of Hitachi with Tagma Store, of NetApps with their newly spun off applications. The general limitation is, in the end, they still look to make the bulk of their revenue with the hardware. As a result, the competing products always end up being partially completing. They're a conclusion looking for an argument. I think that it is inevitable. I also think the major vendors go in this direction as slowly as humanly possible. I believe EMC has drunk the Kool-Aid when EMC says, buy any disk you want, we don't care about the hardware, we don't care, right? Whenever, for the convenience of the customer, the software ends up being hosted on a box of their invention, when the disks that it drives are bought from them, it introduces a fundamental contradiction between an open software architecture for storage and the same old racket for selling hardware by the major hardware vendors. It is not reconcilable in pieces. Right? What it does is it reintroduces the proprietary issues on a new platform, on a new basis.